Hey there, welcome back to the British Accent Podcast. I'm Emily.
And I'm Nick. Really glad to have you with us today. We're diving into something that a lot of people wrestle with, sometimes quietly, sometimes painfully, letting go of who you thought you should be.
Yeah. That version of yourself you pictured years ago, or maybe the one your family, school, or even society made you feel you had to become. It's hard to realize you're not that person, and maybe, you never really wanted to be.
It's funny, isn't it? We chased this image for years, thinking once we hit it, we'll feel complete. But then you get close, or life takes a turn, and you realize, it doesn't quite fit. Like wearing someone else's coat.
Exactly. And the hard part is, sometimes we hold on because we don't want to disappoint anyone. Or because we've invested so much time and energy into this version of ourselves that walking away feels like failure.
But staying stuck in something just because you started it? That's not growth, that's fear. And fear can keep you locked in a life that was never really yours to begin with.
And here's the thing, your worth isn't tied to who you thought you'd be at 25, 30, 40, or whatever. It's okay if the dream changed. It's okay if you changed. That doesn't make you weak. It makes you honest.
Letting go isn't giving up, it's growing up. It's choosing real over perfect, and truth over pressure. And that takes guts, especially in a world that loves labels and tidy boxes.
And when you do let go of that old version, you make space. Space to meet the person you actually are. The one that maybe got buried under expectations, old dreams, and other people's opinions.
And trust me, that version of you, the one that's raw, honest, maybe a little messy, is the one worth fighting for.
And sometimes, it hits you at the most random moment. You're doing something small, washing dishes, walking home, and it just dawns on you. I don't think I want this life I'm chasing. That's not a breakdown. That's clarity.
It's like waking up from a story you didn't write. And it can feel disorienting at first. You look around at everything you've built, and suddenly wonder, was I building this for me, or for the version of me I thought I had to be?
That's such a tough question. But once you ask it, it's hard to ignore. You start realizing how many decisions you've made out of pressure, not preference. And how much of your identity was tied to approval instead of authenticity.
And when you start peeling those layers back, it's not always pretty. There's grief, honestly. Grief for the years you spent pretending, or the parts of yourself you pushed down just to keep up appearances.
Totally. But you're not broken for feeling that. You're becoming. And that's the messy middle no one really talks about. The in-between stage, where you're not who you were, but not quite who you're becoming yet.
That space is hard. Because you don't have the old mask anymore, but you're still figuring out your new skin. And the people around you might not get it. Some will resist it. They like the old version of you because it was familiar, even if it wasn't real.
Yeah, and that's when you realize that letting go of who you thought you should be sometimes means letting go of who others wanted you to be too. And that's where real freedom begins.
Because once you drop the act, even if it shakes things up, you give yourself permission to finally be seen. Not for what you do, or how well you fit in, but just for existing. And that's enough. That's always been enough.
I think one of the biggest shifts is realizing that peace matters more than the image. When you stop performing, even if it means disappointing some people, you gain something far more valuable, yourself.
Right. And it's weird at first, when the noise quiets down. You don't have that constant chase or pressure anymore, but now you've got silence, and in that silence, you meet parts of you never had time to listen to before.
Parts that have been whispering for years, just waiting for you to slow down and say, hey, what do I actually want? Who am I when no one's watching?
It's a big ask, that. Because a lot of us were raised to hustle, to push, to achieve. Slowing down and questioning the whole structure? That's scary. It almost feels like rebellion.
But maybe that rebellion is the most honest thing we can do. You know, unlearning all the rules we never agreed to in the first place. Questioning the voice that says, you should be more, do more, have more by now.
Yeah, the infamous, by now. It's toxic. Like there's this invisible timeline we all signed without reading the fine print. And if you're not married, successful, or whatever by a certain age, suddenly you're seen as behind.
Behind who? Based on what? Everyone's story unfolds differently. And truthfully, some of the most authentic, grounded people I know took the longest routes to themselves. And that's beautiful.
That's growth. Real, deep, unfiltered growth. Not the Instagram version with perfect captions and curated aesthetics, but the real-life stuff. The mornings where you cry, and the nights where you sit with yourself and choose not to run anymore.
And when you stop running, when you stop proving, that's when you start living. Quietly, deeply, on your own terms. Not as who you were supposed to be, but who you actually are.
You know what's interesting? Once you give yourself permission to let go, you start seeing how many people are quietly craving the same thing. They are tired too. Tired of pretending. Of chasing versions of themselves that don't fit anymore.
Absolutely. And it's not always loud. Some people don't talk about it, but it shows in their eyes, in the way they hesitate before answering when you ask how they're really doing. It's like there's a collective breath waiting to be exhaled.
And maybe when one person drops the mask, it makes it safer for others to do the same. That's how real connection begins, isn't it? When we stop performing and start telling the truth.
Yeah. Real connection isn't built on perfection. It's built on presence. On being brave enough to say, this is me now. I'm still figuring things out, but I'm done pretending I've got it all together.
And it's wild how freeing that is. Because once you drop the pressure to be the person you should be, you can finally become the person you are, the one who's always been quietly waiting underneath.
The version of you who isn't trying to impress, just trying to live. To breathe deeply. To love honestly. To feel things without apologizing for them.
That's the journey, isn't it? Not towards perfection, but towards presence. Towards being okay with being unfinished. Because maybe that's what we've been missing all along, the grace to just be in the becoming.
I love that, the grace to just be in the becoming. We don't say that enough. We're always aiming for a final version, some finished product. But the truth is, we're constantly evolving. There's no final draft.
Exactly. And chasing a final draft keeps us stuck. Because every time we think we've arrived, life changes, or we change. And suddenly, what made sense before doesn't fit anymore. That's not failure. That's growth.
And part of that growth is grieving who you thought you'd be. That version of yourself you built in your mind, the career, the personality, the relationships. Sometimes you have to let those go to make space for what's actually true now.
That part's hard though, isn't it? Because you've invested time, energy, emotion into that dream. You believed in it. So when it starts to fall away, it can feel like losing a piece of yourself.
But maybe it's not losing, it's revealing. Maybe what's falling away is what never really belonged. Maybe what stays is the part that was always real, always yours.
And maybe letting go doesn't mean giving up. Maybe it just means making room. For new dreams, for different people, for unexpected directions.
I think it means trusting that you're allowed to change. You're allowed to stop chasing something once it stops feeling like home. Even if it made sense back then. Even if people don't get it.
Especially then. Because people will project their own fears onto you. But you're the one living your life, not them. You're the one who has to wake up each day and feel okay in your own skin.
That's why self-honesty is so powerful. Even when it's uncomfortable. When you look at your life and say, this isn't what I want anymore, it takes real courage to do something about it.
And you know, sometimes the most radical thing you can do is just be honest about what no longer fits. A job, a relationship, a version of success you've been chasing. There's power in quietly saying, this isn't it for me anymore.
Yeah, and it's often quiet, isn't it? Letting go doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it's just choosing not to force it anymore. Not pushing yourself into boxes that feel too small, just because they once made sense.
And the relief that comes with that, it's heavy at first. Because you're facing the unknown. But then, it's like your shoulders drop for the first time in years. You're not pretending anymore.
It's also where you start to find peace. Not the kind you get from ticking all the boxes, but the kind that comes from alignment. From knowing that who you are becoming is more real than who you were trying to be.
And honestly, that's when life starts to feel like yours again. When you stop chasing borrowed dreams and start listening to your own voice. Even if it's unsure at first. Even if it shakes a bit.
But it always gets steadier the more you trust it. And little by little, you start making choices that feel like self-respect. You stop asking for permission to be who you are. You just begin.
It's not always easy, but it's real. And I think real matters more than polished. More than perfect. Because real is what lasts.
Real is where connection lives. Where healing happens. Where you finally look in the mirror and think, I'm not who I thought I'd be. I'm someone better, because I chose to be honest, even when it was hard.
It's also about giving yourself permission to evolve without guilt. You're allowed to change your mind, your pace, your path. You're not betraying your past self, you're honoring who you are now.
Absolutely. And sometimes that means disappointing others. That's tough. Especially when people have expectations based on the person you used to be. But it's not your job to stay the same just to keep others comfortable.
That's a powerful shift, isn't it? When you realize you don't owe anyone a consistent version of yourself. You only owe yourself honesty. Growth looks inconsistent from the outside, but it's what keeps us alive inside.
And it's often in the mess of that in-between, when you've let go of what was but haven't yet figured out what's next, that you really find who you are. Not the curated version. The raw, honest, human you.
And when you start making peace with that version, messy, uncertain, still learning, that's when you finally breathe again. You realize you don't need to have all the answers. You just need to keep showing up with truth.
There's something really grounding about that. About saying, I don't know where this is going, but I trust myself enough to keep going. That's a kind of quiet bravery no one claps for, but it changes everything.
It does. Because the longer you carry an identity that no longer fits, the heavier it becomes. But the moment you put it down, even if you feel lost, you're finally free to walk your own way. And that walk, even if slow, is yours.
And it's okay if no one else understands your pace or your path. You're not here to live a story that looks good, you're here to live one that feels true. Even if it takes a little while to write.
And I suppose the beauty of it all is that letting go doesn't mean giving up. It just means you're brave enough to admit when something no longer serves you, and that's where real growth begins.
It's about choosing alignment over approval. Peace over perfection. And most of all, truth over expectations. Because the person you're becoming is worth the shedding of who you no longer are.
Thanks for being with us today. Wherever you are on your journey, whether you're just starting to question things, or deep in the process of change, just know this, you're not alone, and you're allowed to grow at your own pace.
We hope today's chat gave you space to reflect, to breathe, and maybe to be a little kinder to yourself. You're doing better than you think.
We'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care of yourself.
And remember, your journey is valid, even if it looks nothing like what you imagined.